What up, people? Cracked Lemonade here, and I have arrived to talk about a game that was released for the PlayStation 2, and that game is Chaos Legion. The reason that I want to talk about Chaos Legion is that it's a Capcom game and it's a Devil May Cry clone. And
Tis the
on
darkest
top
cliff
of
thou
that,
bearest it sacrifices stray souls to summon unearthly force.
Capcom released this game in March
Unearthly
of
force shall it fade
2003.
softly, tis named Chaos
Now,
Legion.
when I saw the 2003 date on the
The
main
sinner
menu
shall be
screen
atoned,
of Chaos
even
Legion,
though no punishment will be enough for
I
your
will
sin.
say that
Sela,
I
why?
did Google
Why were you
the
taken
release
from
date
me?
of Chaos Legion and Devil May
Why?
Cry 2, only to
Answer the
find
end.
out that Devil May Cry 2 was
I shall
released in
never forgive you for what you
January
have done.
of 2003
It's still too soon for you to meet your
and
end.
Chaos
First,
Legion
you'll have to suffer the
was
yoke
released
upon.
in March of 2003.
Follow me, Sela,
So
for your
not
atonement is
only
waiting for you.
was
Come see the
this
hidden truth
game
of this world.
pretty much a Devil May Cry clone, and I
Once a
say
talisman had
this
fallen into the
not
dark side, his
to
tragedy began to unfold.
devalue the game in any way. It literally says on the back
Last
of
night,
the
so
game
Clovis, a
case,
considerable member of our order of
if you
Saint-Gervais,
like
was
Devil
murdered.
May Cry, you will like
After
Chaos
stealing the
Legion.
forbidden Apocrypha of
So
Ozark, the
they
suspect
were
ran
very
into a snake.
blatant in their advertising
His
to
name is
make you think of Devil May Cry when looking at
Victor
this title.
Delacroix.
Now, another thing about
What led that virtuous
Chaos
figure to
Legion
commit such an
is
outrage
that
against order is
instead
unknown,
of
but there is no time to
it being
waste.
rated M for mature,
You
it is
must
rated
track him down.
T14.
Inside
So
of the dark glyphs
I look at
sits
this and
Varhas.
I think that Capcom was either looking for a replacement for Devil May Cry, or I don't know. I think they thought that maybe releasing two different games for two different audiences would be beneficial, but at the end of the day, Capcom continually has this problem where they release very similar games very close together, and it leads to some of those games becoming obscure collector's items. And I'm specifically thinking of the PlayStation 2 title Haunting Ground, which, if you looked up the price for that game, it is probably really, really high. It was high. It was high in 2011, and I imagine that the price only went up um, when looking at like for a game like this. So again, I don't really have too much of a connection with Chaos Legion. This was not a game that I played when it was released. This is not a game that I had when it was new. I don't have any nostalgic connection to the series because honestly, I was playing the Devil May Cry franchise. Um, and I just want to like really emphasize the fact that in 2001, especially the early 2000s, late 90s, there there's a little bit of a, I would say like a communication slash branding issue when it comes to video games. Like there are certain video games that you would see on TV. Like there are certain games that you would see commercials of. Now, I definitely remember commercials for Metal Gear Solid. I remember commercials for Crash Bandicoot, uh, especially in the late '90s because, especially with Crash 2 and 3, they actually got a guy wearing a Crash Bandicoot suit to do some of those commercials. So that kind of stands out to me. Tomb Raider, another franchise I really remember the branding of because Tomb Raider was literally everywhere and people were legitimately hired to talk and flirt with a very pixelated PS1 model of Laura Croft. There were a lot of commercials where she was life size and people were just like flirting with her and literally everywhere. Like Tomb Raider was an advertising like icon until I would say they made the live action movies with Angelina Jolie. Then the games weren't good, and Tomb Raider's stock kind of fell. But like during the PlayStation 1, great advertisements. And I definitely say this because at the end of the day, I I've probably said this before in a previous game, is what makes a game expensive much later on is usually the failure of that game. So, nobody picks it up, somebody comes across it, nobody's like really looking into it. Um, and then like interest of it spikes and people who have the game tend to take advantage and the price of it goes up. That's basically how it seems to work, how the ebb and flow of used games typically work out. So to say that, the failure of a game is necessarily good, I can't necessarily like abide by that. I can't necessarily say that, oh, it's good because, this game wasn't popular at this time, because in some instances it makes the game harder to come by later on. It is one of my regrets as somebody who did not play the GameCube when it was an active system and really didn't look into GameCube games until basically GameStop stopped selling those games. And once that happened, it changed how those games are priced. And I definitely remember in like 2007, 2006, when GameCube games were there, I remember eyeing them a couple times and being like, oh man, like $30, I'm not really trying to do that. But like, a lot of those games are way more. So you never know which direction a game that doesn't perform well will go. And I don't think that Chaos Legion is a relatively expensive game now. I, I don't think it presents anything unique either in terms of gameplay. Like as I play it right now, there are visual elements that remind me of Devil May Cry. Uh it is a hack and slash game like Devil May Cry. Um but the enemy types are different from the types of enemies you face in Devil May Cry. A lot of these four-legged creatures that um lunge at you, and I will say the amount of crowding that the enemies have in this game make it definitely a little bit more difficult, in my opinion, than the first Devil May Cry. I'm only comparing it to the first Devil May Cry because ultimately the reason why I even did a Devil May Cry video was to talk about Chaos Legion. Um, that is that's the truth behind the situation. Um, I took the opportunity to try to play this game um, and get a copy of Devil May Cry, which I was lacking prior to this idea. I had every other Devil May Cry title except for Devil May Cry 1. And at the time of thinking of this idea, did not look up the release dates of um the first Devil May Cry game. Or I mean the second Devil May Cry game. Which probably might have altered my plans a little bit, but I definitely think that in terms of talking about this game, uh, covering Devil May Cry first was a good idea, and especially with the proximity of the release of Chaos Legion and Devil May Cry 2, playing the first Devil May Cry video game was probably the better choice altogether anyway. Because I'm not necessarily saying they were directly competing with each other, but I also think that um, during the same earnings quarter, having two franchises that are very similar to each other um, doesn't seem like the ideal strategy to maximize sales. If anything, it could have caused like a little confusion, a little hesitation about um, playing the game or getting the game because you don't know what you're getting, right? And on the back of this is like, if you love Devil May Cry, you will love this game. But you could also honestly just get Devil May Cry 2 instead of buying this game. So it's not necessarily a good sales pitch for this game, in my opinion. Um, and since I really wasn't aware of this game and I didn't really know anybody who was hyped about this game, I can't tell you that this game was successful. And that would be obvious because we've never seen a Chaos Legion 2. It's not something that Capcom has brought to us, and we haven't seen this character C, who I'm playing as, that the main who is the main character of Chaos Legion. We haven't seen this character show up in other games, and there is, I don't know, there's just nothing that really signifies that this was a successful idea on Capcom's behalf. And I will say this, another thing about this game. The difficulty is actually kind of up there, especially with these larger types of enemies and the way that enemies do damage. But it also is very reminiscent of Devil May Cry 1, where the enemies do a lot more damage than I remember them doing. So you do have to be a little bit more careful. Uh, the issue that I have here is specifically with Chaos Legion, there doesn't seem to be a dedicated roll button. And that second death, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm not entirely sure who hit me or if it was like two enemies that hit me at the same time. Um, but it's my first time like really playing this game. So leave the deaths in, because I'm not really trying to show you that like I am this masterful gamer who like puts in any title and instantly gets it. I'm just plugging in my games, playing certain ones, and talking about the experience that I had while playing the game, and in cases where the game is something that I played when I was younger, my feelings around the game around that time. So, yeah, I don't know. I do want to say, like, yeah, I kept the deaths in because this is just me learning the game. This is me experiencing the game for the first time. Uh, Realistically, I probably played like the first level once before. This is not like a game that I'm revisiting or really have visited before. Like, it's one of many PlayStation 2 titles that kind of sit on my shelf, and like I have them and I'm glad I have them, but you know, you don't always have a reason to pick up and play it. So made that reason for me to play it today. And I don't know if other people found this game great and were disappointed that it didn't have a sequel. I wasn't aware of it. And the thing about the PlayStation 2 is that there's a lot of games. You know, the PlayStation 1 has a lot of games, but the PlayStation 2 also has a lot of games, and it lasted a lot longer than the PlayStation 1. So, when talking about the PlayStation 2 as a system, there's a lot of
I came
gameplay
to save
experiences
you,
that
but you
could
said no.
have been had
What did
and
you say?
have been had
Dreaming
that
of
I
C's
did not
forgiveness?
personally experience. Which I once again will say that is the beautiful part of gaming,
Come, join me,
that there are
and I
so
shall
many
liberate you from
titles
the dark
that
spirit.
you can experience or not experience that really just shapes your upbringing, or like gives you memories that you can associate with like a certain year or a certain age. Um, if Chaos
This launch has been
Legion is
destroyed.
that game for you,
Yes, Your Excellency. The
let
scout
me
has
know.
reported.
I don't
The
necessarily
city was
have any
destroyed in siege
feelings
last night by
towards
an
this
unknown
game.
attacker.
I might
Unfortunately, no
like
survivors have been reported.
offline play through this game and
Also,
kind of get a feel for the story.
also what?
But
There aren't any bodies, none
um
at all. Not even
yeah,
a
I don't
blood
know.
stain.
I can
Only the
definitely
remains of the charred
see
city.
why
And a
this did
message was
not
scrawled
do
on the
better
castle's wall in blood. It
than
says,
the
I am indeed the punishment for
second
your
Devil
sins.
May
I am
Cry.
here to purify the three worlds.
And I'll end that here.
This couldn't have been
It's
done
been
by an
Crack
ordinary
Lemonade.
man.
This has been
There is only one with
Chaos
the
Legion
ability to make a
for
whole city
the
disappear,
PlayStation
barely
2,
leaving a trace.
and I
And
will
from the
catch you
resolute message
next time.
found on the castle wall, it could only be him. Doubtless. There is no time to waste. Find him.